That was good. It's a free heal. Why not? Yo, what is going on, everybody? Hope you are having a fantastic day today. You may be here from my Messmer video. Maybe you saw what I did to Messmer. And I'm going to be showing you guys how you can build a character exactly like that. I'm going to show you two different builds. One's going to be at level 150 and one is going to be at level 200. And yes, you can deal as much damage as I did to Messmer at level 150. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the build. And then after that, we are going to go over the stats for both 150 and 200. All right, so here we are going over the build. One of the first things you may notice is that I also have the Rivers of Blood and the Beast Claw and the Sacrificial Axe. I'm going to go everything in this build one by one, and no, you do not need to have all the weapons I have. I'm just showcasing how far you can take this build. I understand at level 150, you might not have the stamina to wield all of these things and still medium roll, so we're going to go over that. So first things first, we have the curved swords, and this is your bread and butter. This is the main thing. You can get by just using these two, but the Scavenger's Occult Curved Sword. So if you don't know, I'm just going to keep it simple, keep the video short and sweet. Occult is always better for weapons that have innate bleed buildup. So if your weapon, without any weapon upgrades, has bleed buildup on its own, like the Scavenger's Occult Curved Sword, then you want to use the Occult Affinity. If your weapon does not have bleed buildup and you're trying to make things bleed, you want to use the Bleed Affinity. Now, this build is better if you have two Scavenger's Occult Curved Swords, but if you're on your first playthrough, you won't be able to do that, which I'm on my first playthrough here, so I use the Scavenger Occult's Curved Sword with the Bandit's Blood Curved Sword. So, let me say one more thing about Blood and Occult Affinity, excuse me. So, Blood Affinity is on this if I am fighting a boss that is weak to bleed, because I want to make it bleed. If I am fighting a boss that is immune to bleed, I would put Occult on this. The reason you do that is because Occult is going to make your physical damage of the weapon scale better with your arcane stat. Blood is just going to make a bleed proc more, so that's why if the boss is weak to bleed, I use the Blood Curved Sword. If they are immune to bleed, I use the Occult Curved Sword for the Bandit. So that's going over the curved swords and the affinities there. Obviously, I have them at plus 24. If you get them to plus 25, that is even more damage. So why do I have the Rivers of Blood and why do I have the Beast Claw here? Because when I'm fighting in the overworld, I don't necessarily like to use the curved swords all the time. You can, but it's a very one-dimensional playstyle, you know, jump attacks. And I mainly use it to just shred difficult bosses. That's what I use the curved swords for. But I like using the Rivers of Blood in most situations. It's just a very good weapon. The skill, the L2 on it, the Corpse Piler skill is just really good. So that's why I have Rivers of Blood on here. And then I have the Occult Beast Claw because there are certain enemies that the Rivers of Blood won't stagger right away. That the Beast Claw, with its weapon skill, it will just stagger enemies. For example, the Black Knights or Messmers, like the bigger knights with the red cloaks. The Occult Beast Claw just shreds them with the L2. They get staggered the whole time and they can't do anything, where the Rivers of Blood can't do that right away. So I like to have the option to be able to switch. Okay, if I'm fighting a Black Knight or one of Messmer's Knights, I'm going to use the Occult Beast Claw and I'm going to stagger them. If I'm fighting a bat or a bird or most things, I'm going to use the Rivers of Blood. And if I'm fighting bosses, I'm going to use the Scavenger Occult Curved Sword. Again, I understand at level 150, you may not have as much endurance as I do to wield all these things, so it's not necessary. But it is good to have the Beast Claw and add the Beast Claw to your build because it does give you a different sort of playstyle in the overworld, and it only weighs 3. The Sacrificial Axe is again there if you have the endurance to wield it. It does add some weight to your build. But if you don't know what this does, is every time you kill an enemy, you get a little bit of FP back. And you do not need to meet its weapon requirements to be able to do that. You just need to carry it in the offhand. So when I'm using Rivers of Blood, I like to two-hand it. And then I have the Sacrificial Axe in the offhand. So every time I kill something with Rivers of Blood, I get a little bit of FP back. Same thing with the Occult Beast Claw. I'm two-handing it. I use my weapon skill a lot, and I get a little FP back every time I kill an enemy. So that's why I have the Sacrificial Axe on this build. We have the Dragon Communion seal because it scales S with Arcane. So this is an Arcane build, and this is the best seal for us to use. Going over the armor pieces, you do need the White Mask. The White Mask will increase your attack power when there is blood loss in the vicinity. You can get this through Varus Quest. Now, unfortunately, a lot of you will be locked out of this White Mask if you did not get it yet, because to get into DLC, you have to beat Moog, and when you beat Moog, you can't get the White Mask if you haven't already got it. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. It's okay, but if you do have it, you will get some more damage off of that. Next, we have the Raptor's Black Feathers. You can get this at any points. It's in Landau. You could look it up, Google it. This increases your jump attack power. So we get a lot of our damage by doing jump attacks with our double curve swords. So that's why we have the Black Feathers. In terms of armor, I have the heaviest armor, Bullgoat, Gauntlets, and Greaves. If you have the endurance to be able to wield this heavy armor, I would recommend doing so because the DLC bosses do so much damage to you. But if you don't have the endurance, you do not have to go this heavy with the armor. You can just do what you have as you level up your endurance stats. Lord of Blood's Exaltation. You can get this, I believe, at any point in a playthrough. I believe it's some random boss, I forget. You can Google it. But it does increase your attack with blood loss and vicinity, just like the White Mask does, so these two stack together. The Claw Talisman increases your jump attacks, just like the Black Feathers, so these two stack together. And then we have the Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis. So the Winged Sword Insignia boosts the power of your successive attacks, and Millicent's Prosthesis does the same thing, and it also gives you 5 additional points in Dexterity as well. So to get this, you have to do Millicent's quest. You can do her quest at any points throughout the story, whether you've beaten the game or not. So if you haven't got these, you could just speedrun her quest and get these. I believe you can just get, when she gives you the Winged Sword Insignia in the beginning of her quest, after you give her the Valkyrie's Prosthesis, I believe you can just kill her to get Millicent's Prosthesis. I don't think you have to see her quest line through to the end, but double check that. I could be wrong. You might have to finish the quest line to the end. I finished it. But I do recommend getting Millicent's Prosthesis instead of the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia if you are on your first playthrough. That way you can stack the Prosthesis with the regular Winged Sword Insignia. If you have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, you will not be able to get Millicent's Prosthesis. And if you don't, that's okay. I do recommend, like, if you have like an alternate talisman that you want to use for boss fights, you could use the Ritual Sword Talisman. And what this does is this increases your attack power when you're at full HP. So if you still want to increase your attack power, you can use the Ritual Sword Talisman. It will give you that boost at full HP. What I like to do when I'm in the overworld too is I will take the Claw Talisman off and I will put Alexander's Jar Shard on. Gives me more damage from Corpse Filer, and it gives me more damage from the weapon skill of the Beast Claw as well. And then for boss battles, I put on the Claw Talisman when I'm doing the jump attack. So that's what I like to do for the overworld. Those are some talisman choices that you guys have. And then last but not least, we have the Physic. And in our Physic, we have the Thorny Crack tier, which temporarily boosts your successive attack power. So this will stack with Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis. And then I also have the Stone Barb Crack tier, which makes Stance Break easier. So as we are shredding bosses' HP and inflicting bleed, we are also inflicting Stance Break damage, which jump attacks are good at doing. I like using these for the giant wicker basket fire things as well. So that is it for the build. You can see I'm level 216, so I'm a little higher level here, but I'm going to show you how you can get as much damage as I did against Messmer at level 150 and at level 200 as well. So that's everything here for the build. Without any further ado, we're going to go over to Renala, and I'm going to show you the stats for 150 and 200. Real quickly going over the spells on the build, I have Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, obviously to give us our buffs. Golden Buff boosting our attack and defense, Flame Grant Me Strength boosting our attack. I have Flame Cleanse Me. This is really good for the overworld. It just heals poison and scarlet rot, which is really good for poison swamps, scarlet rot swamps. So really good to have. Swarm of Flies, this can pair really well with things like the Beast Claws. You could just throw the flies at an enemy and then, weapon skill or, do whatever you want to do, and it will just deal massive blood loss to them. Then I have Stone of Garrock. This is what I like to use for a long range encounter, and just throw a big rock. It deals good stagger damage. I like to use it to hit things at range, so I have an option to do so. You can use any incantation you want. It's not really important. The main things you need, especially for the curved sword for the bosses, Golden Vow and Flame, grant me strength. Alright guys, so we are here at Renala. I keep tongue twisting myself now that Rolana is the thing, but this is Renala. And we're going to go over what this build is going to look like at level 150 and level 200. There is a little bit room for flexibility, so I'll go over these stats one by one and kind of explain. At level 150, we just don't have as many stats to play around with. So I do have 50 Vigor. Ideally, we do want to get to 60, especially going into the DLC as we get higher. But I would prefer to have a little bit more damage, stamina, things like that. I mean, you probably saw the Messmer video, and I would prefer to keep the damage that I have versus bolster my defense a little bit more. But as you get higher level, definitely, I would recommend getting to 60 Vigor. Moving on, I have Mind at 25. This may look a little high, but keep in mind, in addition to the curved swords I was using and recommending that you use like the Beast Claw in the overworld, just so not only one can you use a new weapon in the DLC, but you do have another way to play outside of just jump attack spamming. You can do that on the bosses. But yeah, so it gives you another way to play, and 25 Mind gives you a good enough FP pool to where you can pretty much spam the skill, especially if you do put the Sacrificial Axe on. But you don't really have to spam it. So you can reduce this mind if you would like some more points in something like endurance, because this build does chew through stamina. So having more endurance as you level up is very, very good. But 22 endurance here is going to give you enough to wield both of the swords and also the Beast Claw, which only weighs 3, the White Mask, the Raptor's Feathers, and some medium armor on there as well. Again, if you want to reduce mind and increase endurance, mind and endurance are one of those things that's really up to player choice. You know, how many times you want to flask, if you even want to use mind skills like that. I mean, if you just wanted to use the curved swords, you don't need mind at all, hardly. Or if you're gonna use the Beast Claw but use the weapon skill very little, you can get away with less mind. But if I were playing and I were at level 150, I would have 2 curved swords, the Beast Claw, I'd have 25 mind, and I would have 22 endurance with some medium armor. And then as I level up, I would increase my endurance more. So that's just me. 11 strength is here so you can wield, it is the Bandit's curved sword. If you have done New Game Plus and you have multiple Scavengers curved sword, you only need 8 strength, I think. So you could go lower than this and just put that point elsewhere if you would like. I have 16 dex because with Millicent's prosthesis, this is going to give me 21 dex, which is enough to wield the Rivers of Blood. And whenever I wield the Rivers of Blood, I always two-handed. So that strength is going to be enough. And you may be wondering, oh, the Beast Claw needs 13 strength. If you two-hand it, it's going to multiply that strength by 1.5, so the 11 that I have, so you don't have to worry about that. And then with Millicent's prosthesis, if I want to wield the Rivers of Blood, I don't need to worry about putting a point to dex. If you don't have a prosthesis and you would like to have the Rivers of Blood as an option, you can go to 18 dex. And then, yeah, if you want to dual wield the Rivers of Blood, you could go to 12 strength and take away some points here. So you do have some flexibility with that. Don't need intelligence at all. 15 faith is here for flame, grant me strength. As we get into higher levels, we are going to want to go to 25 faith so we can cast Golden Vow. And then lastly, 80 arcane is the most important part of getting that DPS, the damage that you want with this build. So if me personally, were running a 150 build, I would do it like this. I would have Millicent's prosthesis to raise my dex, so I have the option to two-hand Rivers of Blood. And then I would have the Sacrificial Axe, the Beast Claw, the 2 curved swords, and the White Mask, the Raptor's Feathers, and some decentish medium armor. And again, you can play around with these stats a little bit. There is some flexibility there. Without any further ado, let's go to the level 200 version of this build. Alright, I'm going to be going over the stats for level 200. You can obviously change these stats around. A lot of these are up to preference. But if I was building a level 200 character with my build, I would do exactly this. So I have 60 vigor. The DLC bosses just hit like a truck. You definitely need 60 vigor, 100%. I have 38 mind. Might seem like a lot to a lot of people, but me personally, when I'm in the overworld, I'm not using the curved swords. I just save those for bosses. So I'm using things like the Rivers of Blood or the Beast Claw, and I like to use the weapon skill a lot on them. And 38 mind is exactly enough for a plus 12 flask, which is a maxed out magic flask, to fully restore all of your mind. So I like to have 38 mind. If you don't use magic as much, if you don't want this much magic, you can definitely lower this, put more points in endurance if you want more endurance or things like that. But if it was me doing level 200, I would have plenty of mind to play around with. 25 endurance, this is enough to carry both curved swords, the occult beast claw, and your seal, and then, you know, your white mask, your raptor's feathers, and some decent medium armor. You could take this higher if you would like to, and I would suggest after this point, just pumping endurance as high as you would like. So I have 24 strength here because I like to switch around my weapons. So 21st strength is for things like Mogwin's Sacred Spear or for the Mariah's Executioner Sword. I like to have the option to switch weapons. I never really understood making a build around one weapon because that would mean every time you want to switch weapons, you just have to use a larval tier. So what I do is I'll focus on one primary stat and I'll meet the minimum requirements for a lot of weapons in that stat. That way I can switch weapons and you know, that way I can switch weapons and it takes me longer to get bored and want to switch entirely to something else, but I love the arcane build. So I have 17 dex because with Millicent's prosthesis, it gives me 22 dex, which is enough to wield the Nagakiba. If you don't have a prosthesis, you could go to 22. If you don't care about wielding the Nagakiba, you could go to 18 for the Rivers of Blood. If you don't care about that, it's all up to what you prefer. We don't need intelligence. 25 faith is for Golden Bow, which boosts the attack and defense, which is really good in this DLC. So 25 faith, Golden Bow, and then 15 is Flame, grant me strength. And then 80 arcane, you don't need to go beyond that. That's like the last soft cap of damage. So if I was building a level 200 character, I would do this. Again, if you don't use as much magic, mind and endurance are really up to preference, so you can up endurance a little bit more. Going forward, I would just pump endurance to be able to wield as much as you want to wield. So 41 endurance for me is exactly enough, like exactly enough to medium roll with the Rivers of Blood, the Beast Claw, and both of my swords and everything, talismans. 41 endurance is exactly enough for me to medium roll. So what I will do going forward, because I have enough to medium roll with everything I want to have equipped, and, you know, I already have that 38 mind for the plus 12 flask. I already have, you know, 60 vigor, 80 arcane. And I meet the minimum requirements for a lot of weapons within arcane. I will be pumping a secondary damage stat, and that will probably be dexterity, which pairs nicely with arcane, things like the Rivers of Blood, a lot of the samurai type swords like the Nagakiba, Uchikatana, things like that. And I'm sure there's new weapons I haven't seen in the DLC yet. So at this point, going forward from level 216, I'm just going to be pumping a secondary damage stat. But yeah, this is kind of a rough guide of what I would use for level 150 and level 200 builds. So that is going to end it for the builds section of the video. Alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed me going over this build. I hope you enjoyed the little Messmer, you know, in 30 seconds. That was absolutely amazing. And this build isn't really anything new. It's been around for a while. I'm sure other people have made videos on it in the past. But I wanted to bring light to it again because it just really is great at shredding bosses in the DLC that have such huge high health pools. And if they're going to kill me in 2 hits, I'm going to kill him in 30 seconds. So I'm going to do the same thing right back. With this build, I don't summon because I don't think I need to. I hit the bosses just as hard as they hit me. But if you did do Spirit Ash summons on top of this, you could just shred a lot of these really, really hard bosses. So I hope you enjoyed the build. Leave a like and subscribe if you like this type of content. I play a lot of Elden Ring, so I could do some more Elden Ring content if you like that. Also, I might be live on Twitch. That description's in the link below. If you'd like to watch me and my playthrough live with this build, I would really appreciate you hanging out, so you can do that as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the DLC. And as always, I will see you next time. Peace.